Hey guys, it's Paradise, and Monster Hunter Wilds is shaping up to be one of the most ambitious entries in the series. Well, with so many details out there in interviews, including things we haven't covered and think are pretty cool to talk about, we've got a lot to go over, from developer insights into monster hit zones, their inspiration, gear designs, and even weapon designs. So we have a lot of cool stuff, especially thanks to the IGN First Interviews over the last few weeks, and of course the amazing developers. Since this is stuff that just straight up intrigues us, I figured you might want to hear about it too. Let's get into it, starting off with one of the biggest surprises we had recently, which is the return of Gravios. This is of course a fan favorite but notoriously tough and armored monster. The director Tokida explained why they decided to bring it back and how one of the new locales, the Oil Well Basin, plays into this. He said, "When we're thinking about a monster that would fit in the Oil Well Basin's environment and would not overlap in gameplay terms when looking at the overall ecosystem hierarchy, we realized we could reintroduce Gravios in a way that felt fresh to play, so we decided to bring it back this time." But you see, it's not just a return of Gravios, it's also a complete visual rework and mechanical rework. Fujioka has highlighted how they got a much more detailed and immersive design on Gravios compared to previous entries. But Tokida gave some amazing insights into monster hit zones and how they've been refined with newer technology, allowing them to more fine-tune how damage registers on different monster parts. He said, "In the past, we could only assign rough data to specialize the consistency of monsters' flesh. So if you didn't hit the soft spots with your weapon, such as a lance, you wouldn't be able to deal damage. With Gravios in Wilds though, attacks against its hard shell will still bounce off, but if you position yourself properly and aim for its backside, you can much more effectively deal damage." The long and short of it basically means the hit zones in Monster Hunter Wilds are actually more detailed and accurate. This means that strategic positioning and targeting will play an even bigger role in combat, but for us seasoned hunters it's gonna be the same and we kinda know what's up. It is however great to hear that they've actually made improvements to the hit zones themselves and where they register on the monster, so that is really exciting. And you have to think about it, with the introduction of focus mode, it'll be even easier to land those precision hits on weak points and soft spots than ever before. But the thing is, Wilds isn't just bringing back old favorites, it's also introducing unique and new monsters like Rompopolo and Ajarikon. The executive director and art director Fujioka describes Rompopolo as a tricky, swamp-dwelling monster that was actually inspired by a mad scientist. He said, "We designed it as a tricky monster that lives in swamps and creates chaos for players by using its stored-up toxic gas." The idea of a mad scientist came up pretty often when we were trying to depict this trickiness. He even goes on to explain that this helped inspire the concept of the monster and is why they gave it that chemical purple look and glowing red eyes. Then we get a little insight into its equipment, where Fujioka says the equipment is surprisingly cute, especially the Palico equipment, which is really interesting considering the monster is kind of creepy. On the other hand, if we take a look at Ajarikon, it's much more of a straightforward powerhouse, but they didn't want it to just be that. So they went to the drawing board to try and figure out how to make it stand out, and Tokida explains its design philosophy here. He says, "Normally when we design fanged beasts, their hips are low to the ground, putting their heads at eye level with the hunter. But we thought that this can make it harder to sense the threat that the monster poses. That's why we were consciously giving this monster a more top-heavy, towering silhouette. We then added flame elements that are at home in the Oil Well Basin, as well as grabbing attacks reminiscent of a wrestler to highlight its physical strength. It's a monster that combines strength, physical attacks, and flames, like its attacks where it melts something that it tosses at you." And to make it stand out even more, Fujioka emphasizes its unique heat-based attacks, saying, "I talked quite a bit with our artists and designers about giving it more personality in some way. It's a monster in a fiery location, so I wanted to make use of the flames and heat. That said, I didn't want it to simply breathe fire or create flames. That's how we ended up with a design where the monster seems to be wearing the flames on its back. From here we got the idea of Ajarikon's rising internal temperature, giving it enough heat and power to melt anything in front of it, which seemed to give it so much more personality. A Gyrocon will grab the hunter or hug a Rompopolo, and we want to make the players think about how much they want to avoid getting hugged by an absurdly hot monster. We decided to make it seem scary by making it so hot that it can melt anything and everything around it. So this is likely why a Gyrocon is looking like such a visually impressive and menacing monster. They didn't want it to be a boring powerhouse, they wanted it to have more personality and an expanded moveset to match the environment. Ultimately, this is why we have this amazing, brutal, close-range fire-based monster that just looks incredible. Now, more recently, we did get the exciting reveal of new Udra's gameplay. This is, of course, the massive cephalopod octopus-style monster. But according to Tokuda, this was an idea he had years ago back to Monster Hunter Tri, but they just couldn't bring it to life, and that is until now. He said one of the concepts in Tri was underwater combat. So I did write a proposal for an octopus-shaped monster at the time. There were challenges keeping us from making that a reality though, including technical ones, but even so, I've been holding on to that proposal for all this time. So basically, thanks to our advancements in technology, new Udra is finally here, and Tokuda's wish of this octopus-shaped monster is here. Now, it may be obvious, but a lot of thought did go into its design and how hunters will actually face off against it. It's meant to be a strategic fight, where severing its tentacles can weaken its area of effect attacks, and you can sever multiple tentacles to basically disrupt its moveset. According to the devs, they said this makes for an interesting multiplayer hunt, where its attention is split between hunters. Now finally, let's talk about weapons, because Tokuda and Fujioka explained how the weapon designs in Wilds are balanced and weighted against the Greatsword, causing a sort of standard for the feel and speed across all the weapon types, thus avoiding a slippery slope where things get faster and faster paced. Fujioka said creating a game that's fun to play using the Greatsword's weight makes it easier to create weapons that fight with a quicker tempo. If high-tempo weapons became the focus, or if we matched the speed of the monsters to them, the movement would just get quicker and quicker. I think we're able to create a game that feels like Monster Hunter when you play it by making sure both sides are properly tuned with a weapon that has the Greatsword's tempo. Tokuda even goes further into this, explaining how the Greatsword is basically the most well-rounded weapon in Monster Hunter, and likely is why it's the center of their weapon design balancing. He says, I guess you could say, once you've got used to the game, you'll notice the Greatsword is the most rounded of them all. While the speed of weapons like the dual blades or sword and shield will always result in there being technical elements needed in order to earn damage in small ways, you're able to get straight to defeating a monster once you're good at using the Greatsword style as it exists. It can even block, it has area of effect attacks, it can create moments where you can deal solid damage, and it actually is made so you can go back and forth with a monster in the most straightforward way if you can just get used to its weight. So in other words, by balancing the game around the deliberate, weighty strikes of the Greatsword, Wilds is able to maintain the sort of methodical and satisfying combat that defines Monster Hunter for us fans of the series. So with that in mind, if you haven't played the Greatsword, are you thinking of giving it a go since the game was actually balanced around it? And in the words of the director Tokuda himself, it's the most well-rounded of all the weapons. Anyway, I hope you thought these details were interesting, as there's just so many cool things to learn about Monster Hunter in these interviews. And of course, we will update you as and when more information drops. Here at Arekkz Gaming, we're two friends who love to play games. You have me, Paradise, as well as 26.
Our goal is to keep the videos as concise as possible by cutting out any of the fluff and focusing on what really matters with high quality videos.
So make sure you're subscribed down below for more videos on your favorite games coming very, very soon.